Welcome to the week number 9 overview for economic analysis of the law here at Rutgers University in Camden. And this week, and also a little bit from the previous week, we'll be reviewing Chapter 9, which are topics in the economics of contract law. And one important section has to deal with remedies. And realize that in the evaluating the efficiency of various contract remedies, the efficiency should apply to formation, reliance, and performance. We and many others have an unfortunate tendency to focus on the efficiency of the decision whether to breach or perform. But there is more involved in inducing efficient contractual behavior than this important decision. So make sure you realize that we spend a lot of time talking about whether it's efficient to breach a contract or to perform a contract, but it's also equally important to take a look at efficiency as it relates to formation and as it relates to reliance. Also, we want to take a look at the information that's available in contracts. The issue of what information to compel the parties to divulge and what they may keep secret is an especially difficult one, so make sure you realize that. Also, make sure you have a good understanding of the 2x2 matrix that is shown in Table 9.4. because it's meant to highlight the fact that there are two aspects of information associated with a contract. The nature of the information, whether there's productive or redistributive, and how someone acquired the information, whether deliberately or through chance. So make sure you're comfortable with that matrix and the implications of that matrix in Table 9.4. Also, we take a look at allocating risks. One of the topics to which we give a little bit of short shrift, but is very important, is the extent to which parties ought to spend time and effort allocating risks in the course of forming their contractual relations. And in the text, it is stated that it is a relevant consideration in comparison to the cost of allocating the risk at formation time, with the cost of dealing with those risks later should they arise. If parties postpone risk allocation until later, then they may not have to incur those costs at all if the risk does not materialize. So those future costs of negotiating about risk allocation need to be discounted by the probability of the risks actually materializing. So make sure you're comfortable with that. The problem with this commonsensical rule is that it may be difficult to imagine what the cost of renegotiation will be. If everything else about the relationship is going well, then those costs might be low. But if things are not going well, or if one of the parties has acquired a situational monopoly, then the renegotiation may be inequitable. So make sure you realize that there's costs of allocating risks, and if you put that negotiation off to the end, if situations change, if it becomes a tenuous relationship between the individuals contracting, or somebody gets a situational monopoly, that will impact the ability to allocate those risks at a later time. Also, the chapter goes over contract modification. And realize the efficiency of any contracts that might be modified. Should parties be allowed to modify their contract after it has been formed, but before it has actually been performed? Our first instinct is to suggest that, of course, they should. If the change is mutually acceptable, then it must be value enhancing. But there are other defensible possibilities. One, recently abrogated in British law, is not to allow any modification. The justification for this rule, a mandatory rule, is presumably that it induces the parties to concentrate their efforts at getting the terms of the contract just right in its original formation. But notice that the original contract could include a clause allowing modification under certain circumstances. The traditional American rule and the older British rule for contract modification is to allow it if there is a fresh consideration. That is, in essence, a new bargain. The theory is that the same formation defenses would apply to this new bargain as applied in the original bargain, and that these defenses would serve as protection against exploitation of one party by the other. There is an economic reason to be skeptical of modification. It may be coercive or unconscionable. parties may be so deep into performance of the contract that they might agree to modification rather than lose everything that they have thus far committed to the completion of a project. And finally, the notion of unconscionability. There's a unifying economic theme in cases of unconscionability, and that notion is that of a situational monopoly. This is a monopoly that no one set out to create. It simply happened, and once it came into being, one party has taken advantage of the situation. For example, suppose that two ships come across a third ship, which is foundering. The foundering ship contains a cargo of valuable whale oil that will be lost in the event that the ship sinks. The two captains of the seaworthy vessels hold an auction to see who will pay more for the cargo of whale oil. The higher bidder, whose bid is far below the market value of the oil, saves the cargo and the crew. Back in the harbor, the rescue captain seeks to void the sale of the whale oil on the grounds that the terms and conditions were unconscionable. So be aware of that notion of unconscionability, especially the need for a situational monopoly.